My parents threatened to raise my rent unless I became my sister's unpaid nanny. They didn't expect that I'd disappear overnight, leaving them to deal with the chaos themselves. I'm a 25-year-old who worked hard to graduate college and land my first job as an elementary school teacher. It's not a high-paying career, but I enjoy working with kids, so it's worth it. Still, money is tight when you're just starting out. That's why I've been living with my parents in the suburban home I grew up in. It's not ideal, but it's practical. They charge me rent, what my dad calls a reasonable amount, and I cover my own groceries. I also help out with chores, from mowing the lawn to fixing things around the house. And last summer, I even cleaned out the garage when Dad injured his back. It's not glamorous, but it's temporary. My plan was to stay a couple of years, save money, and then move out. Simple, right? Well, it was simple until my older sister Martha came back into the picture. Martha is 32, and to put it kindly, responsibility has never been her strength. Growing up, she was always the golden child. Maybe it was because she was the firstborn, or maybe our parents just had a soft spot for her. But she could do no wrong in their eyes. She dropped out of college twice. The first time because she wasn't inspired, and the second time because she said professors were too demanding. She's never held a job for more than a few months. Whenever something went wrong, she'd quit and claim it wasn't her fault. And every time, our parents bailed her out. Late on rent, they paid it. Car trouble, they covered it. Speeding ticket, Mom wrote the check while complaining that police unfairly targeted young women. Meanwhile, I was scrubbing toilets at a diner to save for college and taking out loans to cover tuition. I thought Martha had been living independently for the past couple of years, but it turned out she'd been bouncing between apartments, constantly behind on rent, with our parents quietly keeping her afloat. I didn't realize how bad it was until she showed up one day and casually announced she was pregnant. I'm not judging her choices, but the truth is, she wasn't in a stable situation. The baby's father was someone she'd only been seeing for a couple of months. And from what I could tell, he vanished as soon as he found out. You'd think this would be Martha's wake-up call, a reason to finally get her life together. But no. Instead, she ran to Mom and Dad, who immediately went into fix-it mode. Within a week, they were renovating the basement to create a small apartment for her, complete with a kitchenette. I overheard Mom mention dipping into their retirement savings to pay for it. I tried not to get involved. If they wanted to spend their money on Martha, that was their decision. But I already knew what was coming. Our parents have a way of pulling everyone into Martha's problems. At first, I told myself it wouldn't affect me. She'd have her own basement space, and I'd continue with my life. But that outlook lasted only a couple of months before the pressure started. Mom began hinting that I should spend more time with Martha because she was going through so much. This, despite the fact that I was working full-time and usually came home exhausted. Then came the guilt trips. Martha doesn't have anyone else to lean on right now, Mom would say while looking directly at me. Dad wasn't much better, slipping Martha into conversations. "You should be grateful for what you have, Abby," he'd say over dinner. "Not everyone's as fortunate as you." Fortunate? I was barely managing, while Martha was being handed a renovated apartment and endless support. Things escalated when I overheard Mom and Dad one evening. Mom said, "She'll need a lot of help once the baby comes." Dad replied, "Of course, we'll all pitch in." Then he clarified, "You, me, and Abby." They hadn't even asked me. They had already decided. Not long after, Martha started coming over more often, lounging around and complaining about her situation. She'd make snide remarks about how lucky I was to have a stable job and no kids. I kept quiet, but I couldn't shake the thought. Why does this always end up on me? The breaking point came at dinner one night. Dad made spaghetti, his go-to family meeting meal. About halfway through, Mom cleared her throat and began, "With Martha moving back, she'll need help." Dad jumped in. "With the baby, of course. It makes sense for you to help out since you're good with kids." I asked, "Help how?" Dad answered, "Babysitting, just when you're home." Mom added, "You're usually back by 3, and you're not paying full rent anyway." I was stunned. They were essentially expecting me to take on childcare as a second job without pay. Martha finally looked up from her phone to mock me. "Wow, Abby, I didn't know helping your sister was such a big deal." I pushed back. "I already pay rent, buy my groceries, and help around the house. That should be enough." Mom snapped that I was being selfish. Dad insisted family helps family, and Martha sat smugly, as if she had already won. Then Mom dropped the real threat. "If you're not willing to help, maybe we need to rethink your rent." I couldn't believe it. They were using rent as leverage to force me into being Martha's nanny. The following days were tense. My parents made passive-aggressive comments about my free time, while Martha moved more of her belongings into the house, taking over the basement and even my food from the fridge. When I confronted her, she brushed it off. Mom said I could. Mom then demanded I apologize to Martha for making her feel unwelcome. When I pointed out the lack of boundaries, Mom dismissed it. "This is her home too. You need to learn to share." It was clear they weren't interested in fairness. They just wanted me to fall in line. Soon after, Dad sat me down with a budget sheet, saying expenses were going up and I'd need to contribute more if I wasn't going to help with childcare. That was the last straw. I knew I couldn't stay in a house where my boundaries didn't matter, and where I was seen only as free labor. Leaving wouldn't be easy. I hadn't saved much, and rent was expensive. But staying meant being trapped in Martha's cycle forever. So I started planning. I pulled up my budget spreadsheet and realized that if I cut back, I could manage a move. The timing was perfect. My coworker Alicia had recently mentioned she was looking for a roommate. I texted her, "Is that still an option?" She replied right away, "Yes, want to talk after work?" For the first time in weeks, I felt hope. She asked, while looking up from her stack of essays. I hesitated, unsure how much to share, but finally said, "I'm thinking about moving out of my parents' place. Things have gotten too complicated." Elia nodded, as if she already understood. "The offer still stands," she said. "It's not a big place, but it's clean. We'd split everything evenly. Rent is $800 a month, utilities included." It was higher than I hoped, but still manageable. "When would you need someone to move in?" I asked. "Yesterday," she joked, then added, "But seriously, anytime. If you're in, the room is yours." I told her I'd confirm by the end of the week, but in my mind, the decision was made. This was my way out. The challenge was leaving without stirring up even more drama. If my parents caught on too soon, I knew they'd try to interfere, guilt-tripping me, arguing, maybe even raising my rent on the spot to keep me stuck. So I stayed quiet. I began packing slowly, focusing on essentials, clothes, personal items, and anything too costly to replace. I stored everything in my car's trunk, hidden under a blanket in case anyone noticed. At the same time, I documented everything, taking pictures of my room, furniture, and electronics. I knew from experience that Martha often forgot what belonged to her, and I wasn't about to lose my belongings in the shuffle. One night, while everyone was asleep, I printed a letter giving my 30-day notice. I'd researched and learned that while I wasn't technically a tenant, having it in writing was still smart. I didn't want them accusing me of leaving without warning. I barely slept that night, constantly checking the clock and listening for movement. At 6 a.m., I slid the envelope under their bedroom door. The reaction was immediate. When I returned from work that evening, Mom and Dad were waiting in the living room. "What's this?" Dad asked, holding the letter like it was a personal betrayal. "It's my notice," I replied evenly. "You're really doing this?" Mom asked, her voice already trembling. "Yes," I said firmly. "I found a place and I'll be moving out by the end of the month." "You can't just leave," Mom said. "What about Martha? What about the baby?" I took a deep breath. Martha and the baby aren't my responsibility. I've done my part here, but I can't keep living this way. "What's wrong with you?" Dad snapped, his voice rising. "You were never this stubborn before. We've given you so much, letting you live here, helping you get on your feet, and this is how you repay us?" I clenched my fists to keep calm. I pay rent. I buy my own food. I've been taking care of myself since college. I'm not a child, and I'm not Martha's backup plan. Mom started crying, as she always did when things didn't go her way. "How can you do this to us? To your sister?" I stayed silent. Nothing I said would change their minds, and I wasn't changing mine. The following days were painfully awkward. My parents barely spoke to me, except for occasional guilt trips. Martha acted like nothing had changed, continuing to spread her things throughout the house. One evening, I came home to find she'd moved more boxes into the basement and stuffed clothes into the closet. "Hope you don't mind," she said casually. I didn't answer. I went upstairs, ignoring the knot of frustration in my chest. In the final days, I focused on preparations, packing essentials, double-checking my budget, and finalizing plans with Elia to get the keys. Everything was set, though unease lingered. The morning of the move, I arranged for Elia to come with her car. We planned to load everything quickly before anyone noticed. I thought the timing was perfect, but things rarely go smoothly in my family. Halfway through hauling boxes, I heard my dad's slippers in the hallway. He appeared at the top of the stairs. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I told you, I'm leaving today," I replied, carrying another box to the car. "You can't sneak out like this," he snapped, following me outside. "We're family. Are you abandoning us?" I set the box down and turned to him. "I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm choosing my own life. There's a difference." Dad looked ready to argue, but Mom appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, tears streaming. "You're really doing this?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "What about Martha? What about the baby?" he cried. I sighed. "I've told you, Martha and the baby aren't my problem. I can't sacrifice my life to cover her mistakes." "How dare you talk about your sister like that?" she shouted. "She's doing her best." "Is she?" I countered. "Because it looks like she's just waiting for everyone else to carry the load." At that moment, Martha emerged, smirking. "Don't worry, Mom. If Abby wants to be selfish, let her. We don't need her anyway." I clenched my fists, but didn't reply. Instead, I turned to Elia, who had just pulled up. "Let's get this done," I said. We loaded my things while my parents argued in the background, throwing out guilt trips. "Who's going to help us now?" Dad yelled. "How can you be so heartless?" Mom sobbed. Martha leaned against the doorframe, watching like it was entertainment. By the time everything was loaded, I felt drained. I took one last look at the house I'd called home for years. I expected sadness, but all I felt was relief. I started the engine and drove off, Elia close behind. The relief deepened when we reached her apartment complex. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, quiet, and most importantly, free of chaos. Within an hour, I was unpacked. We sat chatting about work, and for the first time in years, life felt normal. That peace lasted 2 hours. Then my phone started buzzing with calls, texts, and voicemails. My parents had already told the extended family I'd abandoned them. Aunts and cousins chimed in, shaming me. "Abby, how could you do this to your sister? She's pregnant and vulnerable," one voicemail began. "Selfish doesn't even begin to describe you," a cousin texted. Martha took it further, posting online about how I'd abandoned her, with captions like, "Some people would rather run away than help their family. At least my baby will know what love looks like." I blocked her immediately. This was exactly why I left, to escape constant manipulation and drama. Things escalated when Mom showed up at my school during lunch, crying and begging me to come back. She caused such a scene that my principal had to intervene and ask her to leave. It was embarrassing, but it also confirmed I'd made the right decision. 2 weeks later, I realized I'd left behind important documents, teaching certification, tax papers, and other files. With Mom showing up at my job, I shared the situation with coworkers. Elia and another colleague, Maria, offered to come with me to collect the rest. When we arrived, my room was unrecognizable. Martha had moved her belongings in, mixing them with mine. Clothes I didn't own were shoved in my dresser, baby items piled on my desk, and my nightstand cleared out. "What's going on here?" I muttered. Martha appeared, coffee in hand. "Oh hey, I guess some of my stuff got mixed in. Hard to tell what's yours and what's mine now." "You mean the things in my room where I've been living for years?" I asked. She shrugged. "Well, you left, so what does it matter?" But I'd prepared for this. I pulled up photos I'd taken earlier. "I've got pictures and serial numbers for everything," I said. Her smile faded. Dad barged in. "If you take anything that's not yours, I'll call the police." I laughed dryly. "Go ahead. We can also talk about you entering my room without permission and tampering with my property." That shut him down. With Elia and Marilla's help, I collected my things. Martha tried to claim my laptop, but I showed receipts and serial numbers. The more she realized her plan failed, the angrier she became. "You're stealing from a pregnant woman!" she shouted. "The only one trying to steal here is you," I said firmly. "You've tried to steal my time and freedom by expecting me to be your unpaid nanny. Not anymore." And with that, I left again, not looking back. That was 6 months ago. Martha has since had the baby, and as I predicted, my parents are now handling childcare on top of full-time jobs. They're exhausted and overwhelmed, while Martha refuses to work, claiming stress. The basement renovation is draining their retirement savings, and the household is falling apart. They've tried contacting me. Angry texts at first, then guilt trips, then photos of the baby with captions like, "Don't you want to meet your niece?" I've blocked every attempt. A few relatives who understand my side keep me updated, but I've made it clear. Until my parents and Martha acknowledge their behavior and change, I want no contact. Ironically, if they'd simply respected my boundaries and asked for occasional babysitting, I would have helped. I love kids, and I wouldn't have minded. But trying to trap me into full-time childcare while ignoring my independence destroyed any chance of that. And that's my story. What I've learned is this: sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for your family is stop enabling their destructive patterns. Ironically, if they'd simply respected my boundaries and asked for occasional babysitting, I would have helped. I love kids, and I wouldn't have minded. But trying to trap me into full-time childcare while ignoring my independence destroyed any chance of that. And that's my story. What I've learned is this: sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for your family is stop enabling their destructive patterns.